Hello, everyone, and welcome to our session here at the ACFID conference. My name is Michael, and I'll be your moderator for today's panel. We've got a fantastic session planned for you all, so I hope you're looking forward to the next 50 minutes of interesting debate discussion on relevant and topical subject matter, as well as some real-world examples and learning takeaways as well. So our topic today, we are looking at working in difficult markets, funding, financial institutions and de-risking. You could also put that as de-risking by financial institutions and more the implications and impacts on NGOs working overseas. So my name, as I said, it was Michael Stahoviak. I'm the Head of Business Development, Global Payments, Australia and New Zealand at StoneX Financial. We're an ACFID corporate partner. I've been working with them for a number of years, working with quite a number of their members, assisting them with their cross-border payment needs into exotic markets. So we're a diversified financial services organisation listed on the NASDAQ, working across all the major continents. But we've got a long history of working with non-profits, probably about 800 odd across the globe, 40 odd in Australia. And we sort of view ourselves as specialists in delivering funds into emerging markets. That's why our product tends to align quite nicely to the needs of NGOs working internationally as well. That's about it for our organisation. I'd love to shift the focus to our panellists, who I'm just about to introduce here. So we've got Walid Ali, the CEO of Islamic Relief Australia, joining us. We've got Eddie Ozels, the Ops Manager for Anglican Aid. And we've also got Lily, Director of Strategy and Enablement Services, former Head of Finance, also joining us today.
Hello.
Let's do a quick round of introductions. So Walid, would you like to just tell the audience a little bit about yourself and Islamic Relief Australia?
Yes, thank you, Michael, and good afternoon to everybody out there. And thank you for ACFID for this opportunity on this really quite interesting and important topic. Yes, Walid Ali, I'm the CEO of Islamic Relief Australia. I've been in the role for almost 2 years. Islamic Relief Australia is part of Islamic Relief Worldwide. We are in about 40 countries around the world, providing vital humanitarian aid, emergency relief, sustainable development projects, as I said, in about 40 countries around the world. And I look forward to the participation in this and hopefully can add some value to the discussion this afternoon.
Thank you very much, Walid. Our next panellist, Eddie, would you like to give us a rundown yourself?
Good day. My name's Eddie Ozels. I'm the Operations Manager at the Archbishop of Sydney's Anglican Aid in Sydney. We are a faith-based organisation like Islamic Relief. We work in about 35 countries directly with our partners, and I've been there and done a variety of things. I'm finishing up at the end of the year as the operations manager, but I've travelled extensively and seen the partnerships and been quite involved in the financial transactions that we have to manage, especially in some very difficult places to get money to. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Eddie. And finally, Lily.
Hello, everyone. My name is Lily. I'm the Director of Strategy and Enabling Service from CARE Australia. So I have been working in, I have more than 10 years of working experience in non-Australian organization and the private sector, worked in all areas of finance, like a financial statement, budget, project management, accounting, risk compliance. So the company I'm currently working is CARE Australia. CARE Australia is an international AIDS organization. We work to defeat the global poverty by supporting women to create a lasting change in their community around the world. We deliver a program across 25 poorest community. On average, we assist around 2 million people directly every year. as our majority, as all our program are operate internationally, so I had years experience on foreign currency purchase transfer. In this session, I would like to share my experience with everyone, and thanks StoneX for the opportunity.
Thank you very much, Lily. It's great to have you with us today. So moving right along into it. So I guess the first things first is, let's set the scene here, and what does de-risking actually mean in the context of NGOs working overseas, and in particular de-risking from a financial standpoint. So we're talking about closure of bank accounts, reduction in ability to transfer funds to certain jurisdictions or markets, quite often no real reason given for certain actions, or not much transparency when these things can't quite often be achieved. So I think maybe who would like to have a go at this one? Walid?
Yes, happy to do that, Michael. And your Word document has come up on the screen, just to draw that to your attention. But yeah, look, first of all, going to your question about what does it mean, I think for NGOs working overseas, particularly like Islamic Relief, and I'm sure our colleagues here from Anglicare and Care Australia and others, many others like them, it actually means everything, to be perfectly honest with you. It goes really to the core of our ability to operate. So, and I guess it's probably pertinent at this point to just put de-risking in some simplified terms for what it means to NGOs. It really means that banking institutions, for example, as we alluded to, or financial institutions, close your accounts or restrict your access, your ability to transfer funds to the field. As an NGO working overseas in projects around, as I said, some 40 countries, servicing around millions of, over the last 30 odd years, we've been serviced more than 120 million people who've needed our support. The core of our work depends on our ability to be able to transfer money from where we are and from our accounts to the operational field where we are implementing our programs. So the de-risking itself is a roadblock or an obstacle that can become completely paralyze an NGO's efforts to provide humanitarian support and relief in overseas countries. So and we've had that challenge, and when I took over the charity in January 2020, de-risking was really one of my top focal points of concern, and we began to explore alternatives to try and minimize the possible impact or the risk of de-risking, if I can say, use those words. So and after some time, we eventually obviously got, as you know, Michael, we got onto a relationship with StoneX, which helped us to provide an alternative to the FX provider we were using. We haven't transferred from bank account to bank account for, I can't remember how many years. The conventional banking system from a bank to bank has proven to be riddled with delays and difficulties. So de-risking really, from my perspective, and certainly from the perspective of NGOs working overseas, is really a serious and critical consideration, and goes to the heart of potentially a charity's ability to operate. And therefore, if it cannot transfer donor money to the beneficiaries and recipients in other countries, then the whole concept of why we're doing what we're doing, and donors rightly will be saying, well, if you can't get it there, then what's the point of me giving it to you, if you know what I mean? So this is it is a challenge.
It is sort of a behind the scenes process that is sort of, I guess, a bit forgotten about its importance, really. If we take a recent example, Afghanistan at the moment, obviously there's a lot of focus from the public, an outpouring of support and funds coming in. But I think what a lot of them don't realise is that at the moment there is no way to get funding into the country. One way.
Absolutely, and I was reading our most updated report this morning that came through overnight from our Islamic Relief Afghanistan office, and since obviously the change in the governance in that part of the world, the financial system has come to a complete crippling stop. There is limited foreign reserves in the country. There are very strict rules about who can withdraw what, can only be withdrawn in a local currency. Getting money into the country is our biggest challenge. We have had a very good response to our Afghanistan relief campaign. At the moment, we haven't been able to send a penny because there are regulations at the moment imposed by regulators, by other governments and so forth, that basically are not allowing the flow of money coming into the country, particularly in hard foreign currency. I'm not talking about the Afghani currency here. I'm talking about US dollars or Great British pounds or whatever they may be that the international that the NGOs are using. So that is absolutely right to the core of what we're talking about, and this is the financial system really creating a roadblock for essential humanitarian work, and NGOs, regardless of how big or small they are all on the same page at the moment. And I read from my head office in London, they are actually petitioning the UK government as we speak, because today there is I believe a G20 meeting, and one of the big agendas to try and deal with the Afghani issue, and one of the key points of lobbying and advocacy is how to allow the flow of essential funds, what processes NGOs have to follow. And this is, I think, a very, very big issue, because this issue is bigger than any one NGO on its own. This is really about the impact on the sector per se, and on on humanitarian work that NGOs around the world are doing. So Afghanistan is absolutely a classic and most recent example of that difficulty. I mean, in other parts of the world, we've experienced it over a number of years, whether trying to get funds into Syria, into refugee camps in the northern part of the country, trying to, get funds into Lebanon. There are a number of, wherever the banking system is experiencing challenges or has become highly regulated in terms of the flow of money coming in and out, then the challenges have been there in trying for NGOs, and certainly for people like ourselves at Islamic Relief, trying to get funds to field staff on the ground, to the beneficiaries, to implement programs.
And I think, you touched on a very good point there in terms of the inability to move hard currency into the country. Now, that sort of touches on the core here, which is, at the end of the day, there's no actual sanctions prohibiting organisations from moving funds into the country at the moment. I mean, obviously, organisations are very worried about sending any funds to terrorist organisations, i.e. the Taliban. But it's more the risk, and that risk is what has caused the pullback. The market itself is also shut completely, so there's no ability to convert currency at the moment. No. But it is that risk appetite that is really causing the issue at the moment, to move those funds. And hard currency in particular, like US dollars, euros, which is quite common to see sent overseas. The risk of misappropriation of funds is far greater than that of using a local currency, and that's something that we really advocate and push on all our partners to work with, because it's one, moving local currency into a country. It's very easy to. It's not easy to, I guess, repurpose those funds for another purpose, move them into a neighbouring country, as it was for say, US dollars or euros. You know, it's going to where it needs effectively to your partner's account.
That's exactly right.
All right. Thank you. Well, just moving around. So look, we're just expanding on that a little bit, you know, about what effects does this de-risking actually have on NGOs? And I think, Lily, I think you had a pretty good example that we were chatting about with your office in Myanmar the last few months, or actually it's almost 6 months now.
In February, yeah.
February, I've lost track. COVID, I've lost track of time completely.
Yeah, we have similar experience in Care Australia. So when Myanmar crisis started in February this year, we experienced many issues transfer fund to our own country office, Care Myanmar, to continue our project. Some banks, they just refuse to transfer funds for us because they have their own risk and the relationship to manage. And they also have limited understanding humanity network works. So after February, the first transfer we processed through the traditional bank, as we did every month previously. It takes 3 months to arrive Myanmar bank account. And most of our project had to stop. Even pay our own national staff is a big issue. Once the money reaches Myanmar, the government also control all the money flow in and out through the country, Even like once the money arrives in the Myanmar, the government need to approve and release the fund. It usually takes a couple of months as well. The biggest impact from the delayed transfer is our program beneficiary. People suffering from starvation, disease, and war. Even our staff working for us, especially the junior staff like cleaner, the guard with lower income, they rely on the salary to feed their own family. So for NGO, we work with refugee, gender-based violent nutrition program, and healthy care. All the things we do is to save people and support community. So every delay will risk to the life saving. That's from the program beneficiary part. From NGO part, we also have obligation to deliver service on behalf of donor, which has a limited time frame by the contract. If there is a delay, donor either cut the funding or give us extension. If the cut funding, we have all the staff we employed in the field, we had to let them go. That's costly as well. If there is extension, sometimes 12-month project become 18-month project. And the extended hour we had to work on the project is increased as well. And sometimes we have to cover by our own organization. So those are the main effects we can say from the de-risking area with the delay of fund transfer.
Yeah, and I think it touches on some aspects that we've spoke about. I think time-sensitive projects, you know, the delivery of funds in a timely manner. You know, waiting 3 months for funds to arrive. I mean, that's an extreme example brought on by you know, massive upheaval in the country status there. But you know, you look at some markets where I think while there was some projects that we were chatting about, winterization projects. I know that Islamic Relief.
Right. Yes.
You know, these funds need to get to certain places by a certain time, otherwise the value is somewhat diminished. I understood.
Yes, and absolutely. Not only are they diminished in terms of the impact they have, crucially, because, you know, if you're trying to send in support in time for winter, and it's taking 2 or 3 months, as Lily is alluded to, it's usually you've missed that opportunity. And one of the things that Islamic Relief, we've had to do that is send the money, if you like, ahead of time. You know, allow, you know, and that itself has a logistical problem, because there are times you haven't actually yet, you know, the NGO hasn't yet gone through a campaign, it hasn't called on donors to provide, and now we are actually strategizing around that. We're educating our donor base to say, look, you know, we are sure we're only in the middle of summer, but, you know, the next winterization program will happen in 2 or 3 or 4 months' time. and we're asking for your generous donation, and here's our winterization programs now. And that's only designed so that we can get and overcome the delays in the arrival of funds. But I think also on that issue as well, there are other impacts, and one of the impacts that de-risking has on NGOs is the cost of money transfer itself. I mean, often the impacts can be on the rate of exchange that you're trying to get. I know StoneX always gives us a really top rate, but by and large, it's a challenge for NGOs. You're talking about retaining of staff, local staff on the ground that are crucial to the implementation of your program, because you can't pay them, or whatever the challenges are in relation to. So clearly, our work and our ability to do our work depends very much on a timely and relatively smooth transition of donor funds from where we are to the local field where the project is. And any interruptions into that in that process has impacts for both the NGO locally, for the cost of operations, and of course for the beneficiaries and the projects on the ground. And that is one of the major impacts of de-risking on NGOs.
Yeah. I think you touched on a very good point there, Wailed, around sending funds in advance. Now, obviously not an ideal situation, but these are the sorts of strategies that organisations are being faced to implement, because there are delays in certain jurisdictions, certain markets with certain beneficiaries and creditors to move funds to where they're needed. And that sort of touches on the next topic which we had here, which is, what strategies can NGOs implement to mitigate the challenges presented by de-risking? I think we've sort of touched on a few here, but I think, Eddie, I know that yourself, your experience from Anglican Aid, you've worked with quite a number of different providers, and could probably speak to this yourself from your own experiences. What would you say on this?
Because we work directly with partners, we don't have our own offices in country. We work directly with partners on the ground. We've actually had to be fairly creative in some of those places. So, for example, with the current COVID appeal we're running, we're trying to get funds into Myanmar, which is impossible, but we're actually working through a church partner in Singapore that has a relationship with the Anglican Church in Myanmar. And so we're having to send the money via Singapore. Similarly, Zimbabwe, there's no way you can get money into Zimbabwe without losing a lot of it once it lands in the accounts over there. And again, we have to be creative. So one of our partners had to set up their bank account in Botswana and get across to Botswana to pick up the transfers. Syria, obviously you can't send money to Syria, but again, we've had to work with our partner to, a couple of partners. One where we were paying for food directly to a supplier in Lebanon when Lebanon wasn't a problem, and they would then deliver the food and supplies into Syria. And we've actually worked in the Congo for quite a number of years, and another FX provider had been, prior to working with FX providers, we had Western Union, which was very expensive. And when we looked at the rates we were getting, it was a very expensive process. And so we had our first experience with an FX provider, and we were able to get money into the Congo, but that pretty much stopped overnight, and suddenly we were stuck, and came up with a solution that took 2 or 3 months, which meant education programs were delayed and that sort of thing. So I think even though we're working with StoneX, we have got other providers, and it's not a case of working with one, but having a suite of providers that can, and a bank. We've actually got a bank that we use that is very helpful and gives us wholesale rates.
Yeah. So I think the key point there, I guess, is resiliency, multiple providers, backup options. You're not having a single dependency on one provider there. I think that's sort of the key message I'm getting there. And at StoneX, the way we inherently have that built into our product because we have this network of 350 banks that we bring together to deliver funds into these markets. And we do that in a competitive manner, and we do that in great volume because of the amount of charities that we work with that are delivering aid and funding, UNICEF, World Vision, these types, large organizations, and all the smaller ones as well. But it all comes together to deliver that sort of best execution capability. And, if you look at markets like Myanmar, which we work in, or, Lebanon, neighboring countries, South Sudan, these types of markets, we really do have this boots on the ground approach. That's what they say in my company. We actually pre-COVID people would be flying out. We had a whole team of people to fly out to these markets to build these relationships with the local banks, with the providers, understand the nature of the flows coming in, what the market peculiarities are, because to get funds into some of these places, it's not as easy as just sending a payment to the UK or the US. There's certain other bits of information. We'll touch on it a bit later with some changes that we saw in India the last few months.
And South Sudan's an interesting example because we can actually get money through StoneX into South Sudan, but in South Sudanese pounds, which is actually de-risking our risk because who wants to, once you've got your South Sudanese pounds, you can only spend it in South Sudan.
That's it. And that touches on the point you earlier made about moving hard currency into some of these markets. The risk of misappropriation is far less if you are operating in the local currency. It's the ability to, I guess, like you said, use South Sudanese pounds in any country outside of South Sudan is very, very difficult, I imagine.
Yeah, and in Care Australia, we have been exploring the banking market and the foreign currency provider for years. We also find that different banks have different way manage their network and the risk appetites. Some bank is really good at foreign currency trade. We could get a very good deal with those banks and make some the money to the beneficiary. But some bank understand humanitarian network and be able to deliver service even during emergency crisis like StoneX. As I did mention that they only work a local partner. From our current experience with Myanmar, because we have Care Myanmar country office in the country, then we have the opportunity to have centralized the treasury model to manage the fund. This time during this crisis is very helpful because all our country office have been assessed from compliant with all the regulation like anti-money laundering, anti-terrorism. So a StoneX be able to provide the fund during this crisis emergency time. So if we also only work with local partner, it will increase more layers of complexity to deliver our program. Yeah, and we also found every time we process, another lessons we have learned is every time we process fund to country office and partner, we try to do it regularly, like a monthly, quarterly with limited amount, because they are in the area of conflict and natural disaster. Also increase the possibility of bankrupt. The government may take control of the bank. As NGO, we have obligation to protect fund, reduce the risk of losing money. If it happened, and so we may lose all the funding transferred to the country as well. Yeah, that's our experience working in those challenged countries.
Just expanding on that a bit. So talking about just-in-time funding, moving away from sort of annual, quarterly to more, monthly, more frequent payments, reducing the amount of funds held onshore, minimizing your risks of those funds, losing access to them from a safeguarding perspective. I think that's a very good point you raised there. And I think I was just thinking, Eddie, a point you raised earlier about, some providers being, quite expensive. It is because, you look at the typical Aussie banks that work in Australia, then they might offer you 30, 40 countries. You come to us, it's like 140. And some of these might actually offer you those currencies as well, but behind the scenes, they're probably using their own network of banks, and those network of banks are probably using us as well, because the other side of our business is working with the global banks to reach these markets. So, having someone with that direct market access, and it's all well and good when the payments are getting to where they need to go to, but I think the real litmus test is when something goes wrong, how well that can be handled, resolved, remediated, responded to. I think that's a key point that a lot of people forget too. That follow-up and customer service that we tend to focus on a lot, because at the end of the day, these are your donor funds, and that's a key asset eventually with the work that you're doing and getting them to where they need to get to. All right, so just moving along here. Put a question out here. What could governments be doing anything more to protect NGOs caught by de-risking? Could anything be done there? I think, Walid, you actually had an interesting point, slightly different take on this one, didn't you? Around.
Yeah. Look, my personal view is that governments aren't doing enough to support and protect NGOs, and I say that purely because that through our anecdotal experiences and the processes, we need to understand that governments, as regulators, essentially put in the processes or the expectations or the requirements about how NGOs need to, safeguard their processes. That has inherently meant a lot more compliance requirements and checking for NGOs, but there's been no government support to help NGOs do that. We've been having to go out there and look at what's best practice. Obviously, membership of ACFID, for example, is very helpful in the sense that there is a framework by which you can measure best practice. However, I also have the view that bodies like ACFID are not playing enough role to support NGOs. This is not a criticism of ACFID. This is just an observation that I'm making as a member, as a member of ACFID, that for a body that has a substantial and significant number of NGOs accredited with them, I don't believe there's enough advocacy here, to engage with government around giving NGOs protection. At the end of the day, the de-risking is there because regulators bring pressure to banks, and the banks say, "Well, we don't need this. We'll just pass. Or let's just get rid of this charity or close this account," and that's one less issue that they have to. So there's no doubt there's a link in the chain, and government is an important link in that chain, and therefore by imposing sort of rules around what charities have to do. And remember that it's really quite a complicated process now. I mean, we're talking about a range of mechanisms, legal and regulatory frameworks that charities need to understand and work through. There are usually sometimes sanctions in different jurisdictions, depending on where the flow of money is going. We touched on, and Eddie touched on, places like Syria and others, and Yemen, and so on and so forth. The onus of due diligence is really fallen all on the shoulders of the NGO. So I really think that if government wants to impose that, and that's fine, they have every right to ensure that, and we all have the vested interest to ensure that we're adhering to anti money laundering, and ensuring that there's no financing of terrorist activities around the world and so forth. But given that government is the policeman who has imposed these rules, then you would have thought that government would also be engaging with NGOs and providing some support on how the NGOs can be protected against the risk of de-risking in some way. And if I link that to my expectation where I think ACFID could do more, I think if there could be a an understanding or a process or a principle where, ACFID accreditation means also that you're on a government list of, of entities or NGOs that have been given, the risk-free tick. You're less likely to encounter the risks of de-risking by institutions. I know there's...
No, I was just going to say, almost like a trusted provider list.
Reputable
provider.
Well, accreditation usually, if you think about accreditation in any system, accreditation means that you've essentially ticked a lot of compliance boxes, and as a result, you are deemed to be, accredited or certified as part of your membership. So, if ACFID could be a vehicle by which government has a level of comfort around, the operations of NGOs based in, for example, in Australia where we are, then that should be able to be also used by banking institutions or the entities who are, engaging in de-risking with NGOs to say, well, you know what, this charity is on this list. That means, well, they're certified, they're accredited members, so we have a great deal of confidence that they present a minimal risk to us. And therefore, we shouldn't be obstructing, or at least we should be trying to support, their activities by, facilitating a less arduous process in terms of money transfer.
Yeah, no, it's a great suggestion. And in the absence of any ACFID representatives on this call, I would like to say that we have worked with them for a number of years, and I think they've taken great steps in terms of forming a partnership with us and the services that we can offer to ACFID members.
Well, as I said, it's not a criticism; it's just an observation. And as a member, I think maybe we, this should be a talking point and further exploration.
Yeah. I mean, there's definite, your suggestion of a, accredited provider list, the credibility that comes with it. There's definitely further work that could be done in that space, no doubt. Just moving on to our last question here quickly. So just, it's sort of quite related as well. Could regulators be doing more to protect NGOs from de-risking? I think Lily, we sort of had an example that we were chatting about previously, which was in regards to DFAT. And yes, you've got a lot of experience from your time at CARE working on this, changes to the funding model, yes, localization. Do you want to expand a bit more on that? I think we've just got a few minutes left.
Yes, large portion of funding in INGO area are from DFAT. In recent years, DFAT has been changed the way how they manage the fund. Instead of managing by themselves, they have been managing fund through the managing contractor. In this way, NGO have been pushed to take more responsibility, not just in programming part, also take a lot of responsibility on compliance, assessment, monitoring partner. Especially recent trends, NGO have been encouraged to work with local partner, local business. This is very good. NGO really want to support as well, but it does increase the workload on admin. Every single partner, local business, we have to do comprehensive assessment, ongoing monitoring as well. So previously, we only need to assess our own country office, manage the transfer to there. Now we have to manage all the transfer to different local partner and doing assess and monitoring as well. The cost of fee, but the admin fee we can get from DFAT not change at all. So I do hope DFAT, I have the same view with Valid. We do hope DFAT, ANCN, ACFID could support us more on this area and protect NGO from de-risking. So are they able to balance regulation with practical in trying to prevent money laundering, terrorism finance? Restriction on sending money are resulting in death of person. If there is emergency or crisis happened, are they able to provide us alternative financial channel for humanitarian crisis, for the money to flow to the country really needed? And are they able to influence the government of the bank to clarify, have a standard like a checklist, what document you really need for us to transfer the fund, instead of the banking making their own rule. Different banks have different standard as well. Also, are you able to provide us technology to do all the anti-terrorism checking for every single for us, especially for small NGO with not much resources. It's very challenging for them to comply all those requirements.
Yeah, no, it's a very good point. I know, Eddie, I'm just thinking about yourselves at Anglican Aid. You're not a bit more, not quite the size of CARE in terms of footprint, but you got these similar challenges as well. And I was thinking about one in India, an example that recently came up, where sort of the bureaucracy has, brought about a big change there, where all the local NGOs they had to rush to open new accounts at the State Bank of India, and that really did cause pressure in terms of getting funds to where they were needed. Do you want to expand a bit more on that?
Yeah, I think we have to sort of be realistic that we live in a world of compliance, and it's not just in the Australian end, but in fact, overseas governments are making life more complex. And I think, we have to respect that governments have the right to do that. So in India, because of anti-money laundering and terrorism financing, the decision was made that all funds for international NGOs and charities would have to go through a central bank. So all our partners in India had to then register with the government and open up an account with the State Bank of India. And all transfers go to this account in Delhi, and then are transferred to the local bank account in Hyderabad or Dehradun or wherever our partners are. Now, just getting that set up was quite stressful for our partners, and one of them actually said, "We've got to thank you because your strictness with us helped us to understand and had all the paperwork ready for the government when they came and asked us to provide the documentation." From a government point of view, that looks like we know every rupee that's coming into India and we know where it's going and what it's being used for. So from a compliance perspective, that's made life a lot easier from the Indian government's perspective.
That is it's bureaucracy gone to the extreme, to create that level of control, but the added complexity then that forces a lot of our clients were holding back, had to wait effectively because there was a backlog waiting for these accounts to be opened, and some actually got caught out. Unfortunately, they actually transferred funds to accounts that missed the cutoff, and unfortunately had to be returned, which is never the outcome that we really want to.
And the same thing's happening in Pakistan at the moment. So our partners there were actually only able to send small amounts more frequently, again using cash transfer agencies, again, which is very expensive. But if you've got staff to pay and kids to educate, we've got no choice.
That's it. All right. Well, look, I think that sort of concludes the main section of our panel there. I think we're just going to move over to a Q&A at the moment. So we've got a few minutes left. Participants, sorry, I should have told everyone right at the beginning, you can pop your questions in anywhere through the session. But if you want now, you can do it. There should be a question section and we should be able to come through and see if would like to ask. The floor is open. Might just give that a few seconds. I know there's a bit of a delay from questions getting transferred over from one end to the other.
And while you're waiting for questions, Michael, I think I have another not an idea, I guess, a thought bubble in relation to obviously one of the challenges around de-risking, and many of that we discussed, is getting the money into certain locations. I think there could be an opportunity there for greater collaboration between NGOs, local NGOs here in Australia, around coming together around how we address this question as a sector rather than as a on an individual basis, and possibly ACFID could be a forum for like-minded NGOs who are concerned about this to sort of have a collaborative approach to trying to deal with the challenges. I agree with Eddie in terms of the rights of governments around the world to ensure that compliance and regimes are in place for all of the necessary reasons. But I think the other challenge that brings as well is that we are then at the mercy of those central banks. I mean, in Lebanon, for example, if any money that goes into a bank, formal banking system per se, via or the central bank, will go in on one rate. So the US dollar at the moment in Lebanon buys officially about 3,850 Lebanese pounds, whereas in the black market it's at 15,000. It's almost 5 times. So people are saying, well, hang on, if I sent it through a normal banking system, I'm only really giving them one fifth of the potential buying power of that dollar, and that in itself becomes a problem in terms of how you then cost and budget for your humanitarian programs that you're going to do. So there are a lot of challenges in that obviously NGOs need to deal with, and a lot of them come centered around this whole the risk of de-risking.
Yeah. I mean, you touched on an interesting topic there about parallel markets, and we see that quite a lot in places like Zimbabwe, Lebanon, more recently Sri Lanka, where there obviously is a massive disconnect between the official sort of controlled rate and then the actual rate, the street rate. And this is where we see a lot of the pushback and pressure from the use of local currency, and it becomes a trade-off then between, well, I want to send local currency to this partner because I know it's then going to be used for its intended purpose, but I also want to maximize the impact. And quite often, there's a dilemma there, because if you're using the local currency in some markets, then there's a loss. Whereas sending in a hard currency quite often can be converted via other means, questionable means, this is where there's the friction point in these locations. We see this all the time, but it is something that the regulators were bound to crack down more on, and we saw it in markets like Ethiopia, where there's almost no disparity now between you sending hard currency, local currency. It's so tightly controlled that it really doesn't make a difference at the end of the day. But then you got other markets where you would send a hard currency, and you'd be paying extortionate amounts on the receiving end. This is sort of the hidden cost that a lot of providers, a lot of NGOs don't realise when they send hard currency into these markets is, all right, I'm going to leave their bank to convert, but then they're sort of at the mercy of that one bank converting at the one rate that they've probably not negotiated. They may have negotiated it, but it's not done competitively, and it's hidden. It's not seen. It looks nice and clean on paper because it's all in the one currency, but you really are not maximising your donor funds unless you've got control. And Lily, we've seen this yourself. I think through CARE's experience, you've had experience sending both the local and the hard currency, and we've done some analysis and shown that using the local currency actually is a far more efficient means for delivering funds into some of these markets.
Yes, that's correct. And it also gives some certain degree of certainty about how much funding the local, the local partner and the local field workers can program in the field as well. So there are, I think we should keep mind open to explore the market, do different analysis, try to get the maximum the money can go to our beneficiary.
Yeah, and that's at the end of the day, maximizing your impact. And I think a function so pivotal as money transfer, quite often underappreciated, not really well seen to the donors for that fact. It really can make a significant difference when done properly.
In terms of the loss of funds, the Jordanian government is at least up front in that it essentially taxes NGO money coming in on the basis that, well, we have poor Jordanians as well and we've got to look after them, and takes 40% of the cut as a cut.
No, that's I think we've actually hit our time limit here. There was one question that come through from the audience here, which was, how do you foresee the situation in Afghanistan unfolding in terms of NGOs being able to get funds into the country? I think this is it's a very topical question, and from our perspective, at least from the StoneX perspective, we're very closely monitoring it with our local banks. We can only hope that the regime, or the new regime, comes together. There obviously is a strong desire and push to get money flowing into the country. From the non-profits, there's definitely a demand for it. I think it's just a matter of waiting that out until it comes to a front. And I'm confident something will develop there eventually, but at the moment it is in a bit of a holding pattern, unfortunately. It may take some time. I think we're up for time. As far as we haven't been booted off yet, but I just want to take this opportunity to, I guess, thank everyone for attending. I want to thank Islamic Relief Australia, Anglican Aid, Care Australia, also ACFID for giving us this opportunity. I think we've touched on some very good points here. It's a very deep topic. If anyone would like to obviously get in touch, you can always contact me directly. There should be a link through the ACFID website to get through. I'm always happy to chat and learn if anyone wants to learn more about the topic at hand, or the markets, or just general funds transfer. But yeah, I want to thank you very much.